YouTube for another episode of Shop Talk. And on this episode today, we're going to be talking about how to make your very own inlaid body panels. So what exactly am I talking about with an inlaid body panel? Well, look at the roof back here on the Vette Kart. You can kind of see that I've got that panel not on top of the bars, but actually between the bars. And in doing so, you still get to see all the cage work and everything. And it's just what I prefer. So that's what I do on a lot of stuff. I've done a lot of these panels before in the past on razors and buggies and things like that. And I thought it'd be really kind of a cool touch to do on the Vette. The trick with this is trying to get the panel to line up with the tube. And if we were just doing kind of a straight, plain, ordinary cage where there wasn't much going on, that wouldn't be too big of a deal. But since this cage is twisting and bending every which direction and has radius bars in it and straight bars in it combined together, it ends up being a little bit of a trick. One of the things that I've found to be able to get that a little less tricky is to use some cardboard, which is pretty universal throughout metal shaping stuff, is to use some cardboard or paper template of some sort. But for those of you that haven't done a lot of sheet metal work or metal shaping of that kind of sort, I wanted to kind of share with you some of the ins and outs of what I do and some of the things that I've learned along the way that makes things a little bit easier. So for a number of years, I end up using cardboard or contact paper. What is that shit called? Construction paper. Anyways, the construction paper works pretty good, but the size of it's kind of limited. And one of the other things about it is it kind of gets to be a little bit expensive. I mean, it's of course nowhere near the cost of a piece of metal, so it's ahead of the game a little bit there. But in the big scheme of things, when you start buying a whole bunch of it and you start doing a lot of panels for, say, like a whole entire car, it can actually add up a little bit. So one of the things that I found is going to like Home Depot, and they have this stuff here. This is called X board. They probably have other brands at other stores or whatever, but this particular one is used for like putting down on the floor in your house if you're remodeling or something like that, to where you don't damage your floor. It's pretty durable. It's pretty hard. It's one layer rather than just like a corrugated cardboard, so you can actually kind of flex and roll and bend a little bit like a piece of sheet metal. And it's a lot easier to cut because you can cut with just a regular pair of scissors, which makes it really handy. And it leaves a nice clean edge to be able to trace around and get your new part out. So this particular stuff starts out with it being 3 foot wide, and it's in a big roll of, I'm going to say, maybe 200 or 300 feet. So you have quite a bit of material there to work with if you're doing some pretty good sized parts. So what you'd want to do to begin with, as you would with anything, you'd start out with getting your measurement of exactly what you would need. And luckily on this stuff here, it's under 3 foot, so not a problem just to lob off a piece and mark it at another 3 foot or so. And then start out with a big rough pattern. Then you'd lay the board on there and just start whittling away until you get down to something that actually kind of fits pretty close. And once you get it to where it's starting to fit pretty close, I mean, like this one here I started, it's getting pretty close to there, but you're going to end up having a little bit hanging over here and there, and there again, just start cutting it with the scissors. I've actually found that this stuff is thick enough I can even cut it in my stomp shear, so that's pretty sweet too. So it really does act just like a piece of metal. But it's pretty easy to sit there and say, okay, well, we've got this board or this piece of metal would want to get trimmed off there, and then we go to the other end and eyeball it, trim it off there. We could throw a line on there across that, and then this bar is actually leaning in from where it is on the corners. So once we have it cut off there, we'll still have to go in and put a line on it and figure out exactly where that arc is in this bar. But that's going to be pretty simple to do when you can see most of the bar. So that kind of gives you a ballpark idea of how this all works. Pretty simple. Alright, so once I'm happy with my cardboard template, my next stage is to throw it down on the piece of metal that I'm getting ready to cut it on. And I usually find a big, thick, fat Sharpie, and I run a trace all the way around the outside of it. And I use the big, thick, fat Sharpie because that actually leaves a big line, and if I cut on the outside of that line, it will give me just a little bit of leeway all the way around the part, so that if for some reason or another the metal doesn't quite act like a piece of cardboard, I can still trim that out and make it work. Once it's traced on there, one of my first go-to things is some pneumatic shears, and I can rough out a shape out of a big sheet of metal pretty quickly with these, and it makes it to where it's a lot more manageable piece to be able to get into the little fine spots and everything that we might need to do on some panels. If I get it roughed out with these, a lot of times if there's any big long straight edges or something like that I can put on the shear, the next step would be to go to the shear and stomp it and get those big pieces cut, and then maybe come back with these and do a little bit more fine tuning. And sometimes those just don't work, and you've got to go back to the old tin snip and start squeezing these bad boys and get it all roughed out. So now that you've transferred your cardboard pattern into a piece of metal and we've cut it all out, like I said, it's going to be just a little bit oversized, but you start out with lining it up on an edge so you get an edge that you like, and then on another edge that you like. These two edges look like they're pretty good, and they're both straight, so that's pretty easy to just leave those. Then the next edge is like this one right here, and you can see the metal overlaps the tubing in the middle, like I was saying before with the pattern. So I can just take my marker now and just hold it in my hand where I can slide my hand down the bar and put the mark on there, and now we know exactly where we need to be able to cut that off and get that to fit really good. And then of course we have another side at the back that's going to be a little long, and there again, it too, once it's kind of in place, can be traced with a marker all the way down to the other end and get it shaped to fit just exactly the way we want it. Eventually, I do get to the point where I am satisfied with the shape and how everything's fitting, and get all the little pieces trimmed off that end up needing trimmed off. So the next step of the process would be to grab the flap wheel and go along and clean up all the burrs and any little bits of inconsistency in the panel. And after you're done with that, a lot of times there is still a little bit of a rough edge there from cutting and everything with the tin snips. So I end up having to go along with a hammer and a dolly right along the edge and clean up all of that to where everything's a good, smooth, nice panel again. That brings us to the final step of doing our metal shaping on these panels. And a lot of times I end up doing bead rolling in there to strengthen the panel and give it a little bit of style that way. But on this car, I think I'm going to leave everything kind of smooth. But it does have kind of a roll right there at the back. So the thing that the guy has to do is find something that you can shape it around, form it around, and get some of that shape in there initially. You can put some of it in as you're mounting the panel, but you need to kind of have it started in that direction and kind of already going with that flow before you get going with screwing everything down. So I usually just throw a couple lines across here in the spot where I need it to be at, and I think this bottle is going to end up being just about the right shape to get that arc. So just take my hands and start kind of giving it some of that shape. And you don't want to do it too much in one spot, because it is an arc or a bend on that bar that we're trying to follow. So we just kind of gently, evenly keep going and kind of rolling a little bit and kind of spread it out as we're going. The one end doesn't have much bend in it over here, but this end has quite a bit. So we want to kind of keep most of the pressure down here at this end. Now that it's got a little shape in it, then we can take it over to the car and actually start mounting it down. And just like that, we've got a panel on the roof. That piece is all done. Just needs some more holes drilled and some bolts put in it. I used the self-tapper screws to hold it in place to begin with. And then after it's secured down and can't go anywhere, then I go back through and actually drill all the holes to be able to put the bolts in. As you can imagine, there's a lot of back and forth from the table to the shear to back to the car and then back to the table and back to the shear, and trying to get everything marked and fitting just right. So it's time consuming. So something to think about if you're thinking about doing something like this to one of your vehicles or one of your projects, is the time factor. So on this particular panel, not super complicated, but something like this is probably still going to take somewhere around an hour or so by the time it's all said and done to be able to have it completed. So when you start adding in the number of panels that are on some projects, that's a considerable amount of time, plus the amount of material and stuff that you're going to end up using. Just to give you an idea, I'm going to have one panel there, 2, 3, of course 4 with the roof, 5 on the top of the quarter, 6 for one back here, and 7 for that one there on each side. So that's 14, and then one there, that's 15. Might end up doing some stuff later to do the sides down in here of my little trunk area, but for now we'll stick with the 15. And then I've got one in the front of the car. It would be 16. And this one I actually have even more time in because I've actually bent and shaped it and made kind of this little cowl looking thing to help hide the radiator, since it was sticking up past the top of the roll cage there to get the look I wanted on the cage. Plus it kind of keeps some of the air going into it as well. And then I have another one hidden down inside there, which I've already done and painted and bead rolled and everything. So we're looking at 17 more panels, or total panels, on this one particular car. That's 17 hours, and actually it's even more than that by the time you figure in this one and that one. Both of those together took pretty much a whole day, and that was just those two. So the other thing to think about with panels like this on a cage type scenario is you also have to have a place for all those panels to attach. So all of those little tabs that you see everywhere, I had to cut all of those out, I had to clean all of those and weld and position all of those on the car as well. So that's quite a bit more time too when it comes down to it. I think there's a total of about 150 or 60 tabs altogether. I kind of stopped counting after a while. Well, what do you guys think? Is it even worth the time and trouble doing all these body panels? I obviously think it is because I'm doing it, but you know, that's just my opinion. So let me know what you guys think. Do you like it with or without the body panels? And would you go through all the time and trouble to have all these body panels on there? I'm really curious to know what you have to say. Hit me up down in the comments below and let me know. Well guys, that's it for today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share. We'll see ya.